topic, I expected to find a very simple answer. Everyone's heard of what a strategy is, and I could almost pinpoint it. But in reality, I couldn't. My definition was an adaptable plan to achieve specific goals with reference, of course, to the situation that one is in now as well as later. But to my surprise, it's actually a really hard word to define, as it has such a broad impact. Google defines it as a plan of action or policy designed to achieve a major or overall aim, which I felt could be a little more specific because it doesn't talk about how it can be used in your current situation. A second definition is the art of planning and directing overall military operations and movements in a war or battle. This one could not apply at all to myself, as I'm not a great general. Another definition is from the Collins Dictionary, who defines it as a general plan or set of plans intended to achieve something, especially over a long period of time. This one was a little more specific, but as a student and not a business mastermind, it doesn't really help. Scouring the internet, I found many articles stating that a strategy is neither a plan nor a pattern, but something unique, making it seemingly impossible to consider on a day-to-day basis. Others say that it is a pattern in decisions and choices we make. These two opposing definitions make it impossible to satisfy everyone. To further my point, people will say that it doesn't adapt till much time has passed, while others will say it's ever adapting. So to outline what I'm going to be talking about, I have a few points. Number one, a strategy is adaptable. It's ever changing. You can't always predict the future. That's part of life. It's uncontrollable. When COVID-19 hit, businesses had to change. Our lives as students had to change. Number two, it's considered. You're looking at your playing field, the aspects that you have. Number three, it relates back to choices and plans. Choices and plans and tactics are really the building block that strategy uses. And four, long-term compared to your goals. It needs time to settle, and that's part of the pure perseverance that people are always talking about. Five, it can relate to patterns, and in fact, they are a useful tool. And six, it doesn't have to be unique, and it really is all-inclusive, and you can use it in a day-to-day basis. Whatever you want to call this, whether it's strategy or strategic planning, this is what I'm going to be talking about. Now that we've covered what it is, this broader view where we've stepped back, I'll be going into how and why is it important. First, jumping into the most popular field that uses strategy, business. One aspect of it is investment. During investment, investors have to consider many points. They set goals like, do they want to earn money? Do they want to have opportunities in the future and build those now? They also have to take risks. Investment is really a high risk, high reward situation. And determining how much risk you want to take really helps you to build a strategy. Next, they have to look at their own experience. They have to look at which tactics they can use and how they can spot the right opportunities. Investment also relies on trends. What comes up in investment must come down because companies experience a cycle. And looking into the company's history, one can see their overall aims and achieve investors' own aims. Another aspect of business is advertisement. It's often unique in order to catch people's attentions, and I feel like this is where that uniqueness that people are talking about in strategy comes from. Even so, there are repetitive aspects. For example, many companies will use emotional advertisement or planned obsolescence. Advertisement in and of itself is kind of a tactic that helps companies gain advantage. Also, it is also a strategy as there are many long-term aspects that come into play, like target consumers, communication, employee activity, reputation, and field, as well as many others. A chess analogy can be used to explain the intertwining of strategies. And the overarching goals of both of these players is, of course, to protect the king as well as checkmate the other player's king. They both consider many of the similar things like pawn structure, spacing, activity, and timing to determine who has the upper hand and what tactics can be played to gain more. These common patterns can be seen in specific openings and endgame tactics. Now, what would happen if these two players and their own strategies collide? Well, a game begins. Both players adapt, and they have to reevaluate. If a strategy is good, this move will have been within the scope, and a great move will have been ready in preparation as a reaction. Next, I've always been interested in computer science. I've already touched on patterns and how they can be used to show relations that can occur again and predict certain outcomes. Data analysis can support this. You can use it to predict the patterns seen. Patterns can also form in the strategy itself. A study conducted by Henry Mitzberg looked at the strategy of a Volkswagen work and the US government in Vietnam. These two seemingly unrelated topics came together, and he discovered a few conclusions about many statements. One of which was that strategy follows patterns in organization, life cycle, and even change. And I'll touch on this more later. Next, we'll move on to algorithms and software. Algorithms are a really useful tool to make the computations used more efficient. They can help formulate a strategy because they can look at the circumstances you're in. However, algorithms follow strict instructions. Fortunately, we live in a century of change, where AI is a new emerging field. It can be used to avoid biased decision-making and also compute, but not just that. It avoids lists and is adaptable, providing more insight. Therefore, personally, I'm going to pay more attention to it in the future. Moving into something that more people would probably find useful, life habits. Life is extremely long, as Kendall touched upon. And my mind, as a 16-year-old who thinks that I know everything, is boggled by this. I feel like I've experienced a lot, but to think that I can experience even more, whether that be sad or happy moments, is insane. No matter how much we as students focus on scores and relationships that happen in high school, everything is bound to change. It might be scary, but it's also a little reassuring. If you're not doing well now, you can always do well later. Strategy helps with this. It gets you on a path and with direction. A goal is used to know what you're working towards. We cannot really predict the future in all its entirety. However, a strategy can help outline your life a little more. Many of us are overwhelmed and have experienced uncontrollable moments, thinking about the short term. This is good, but a great idea is to think about what comes afterwards. University. You could go to university. There you can have even more connections with people, and you learn even more and abstract knowledge. Or you could join the working force, where there are vast fields to explore. Speaking of students, students implement strategies. An anecdote that I used is, well, coming into high school, I thought I knew everything. I thought, yep, this is my life. I'm just gonna do well on everything. And that was my mindset. But I failed to consider that inevitably I would fail because I'm not perfect and no human person is. When I did, I felt defeated, like there was no point anymore in trying to work hard. This all could have just been avoided had I had a general strategy. I could have figured out what type of learner I was and used targeted tactics to do better. I could have predicted what my habits were and how I would respond to getting a bad mark, and therefore more easily picked myself up. Because although I made the mistake, it wasn't my fault because I'm just human. And it's completely okay to make mistakes and to fail sometimes, as long as you learn from them. A final aspect I'm going to be touching on is human nature. Humans have really evolved to make strategies. We can perceive ourselves and others and our surroundings. We can link and consider causes and effects. We can critically think and analyze situations. We're adaptable from making tools to predicting outcomes from different patterns. Strategy also has a cyclical nature to it. We can learn from our mistakes and better this cycle. Humans are also social creatures. We can communicate effectively and get our strategy across. And this is where people can build businesses. They can be a general in an army. They can learn to play sports and so on. To conclude, strategy enables one to look in a long-term perspective, not just on the nitty-gritty of everyday life, but look outwards and not be blinded by that one tree stump in our way. We can gain control of situations, and this can even help us with procrastination, as we don't focus on the short term and instead think about our overall aims and work towards that. Finally, it's just mind-blowing and downright cool to start noticing all the fields that use it and how it interacts with itself. Back to the title of this talk, being on the intertwining, creating opportunities for yourself in that game of chess. Thank you.